Welcome to the horror track here on ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Martin, and tonight we are talking about Korean horror. We've seen all kinds of new stuff come up on Netflix. Some folks log into Rakuten Viki and other sites that bring us the best of the Pacific Rim, and there's a lot of scary stuff out there. So we're going to talk about it in all its glory, but first let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Kurtz. I'm the owner of Macon Memoirs Press, where we publish science fiction, fantasy, and horror from marginalized voices. I am also an author of horror. I write weird westerns and sometimes psychological horror and a few body horror stories.
Okay, Derek.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Austin Johnson. I am a horror writer, sometimes critic. Recent stories can be found in Generation X, edited by Rebecca Rowland, Midnight Tales #5, and I have a story upcoming in the slasher anthology Camp Slasher Lake.
Okay, Tigris.
Annyeonghaseyo, I'm Tigris Eden. I write paranormal romance, contemporary romance, dystopian, and some sci-fi romance. I do not write horror, but I love Korean dramas, Korean horror, Korean everything. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Langella. I write male romance, quite a bit of paranormal romance, but also contemporary, historical, lots of different genres with my partner, Ari McKay. I am also a huge horror fan. I've loved it since I was a child, and I have recently discovered Korean horror, and I am addicted.
Okay, Lisa.
I am Elle-Marie Wood. I'm a psychological horror author and screenwriter, and have had the pleasure of watching Korean horror for decades at this point. So I'm very excited to see the availability of it in recent years or really recent months. And I'm excited to be talking about this.
Nice. RJ.
Hey, I'm Rhonda Jackson Garcia, aka RJ Joseph. I'm a creative and academic writer. I write about all kinds of stuff, but mostly horror stuff, romance stuff, academic stuff about horror and romance. And I have a lot of short works scattered about in the universe, but a lot of them are being collected in my first collection that comes out next month.
Yay!
So fantastic.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy, some steampunk and some near future post-apocalyptic. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. So a lot of paranormal aspect and the ghosts, but some of it gets very close to or puts foot in dark fantasy, nudging toward some horror in a few of the series. So there's that, but also I have fallen in love with Korean dramas and some Korean horror. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion. I'm looking forward to finding some new stuff to watch as well.
Can I say something real quick though before we jump in, Gail? I don't want anybody to miss the fact that Tigris said hello to us in Korean, because that's what happened. And it was real quick, and I'm like, oh, I know. You watch stuff enough.
It was really fast.
Pick out certain words. I heard you, girl. Go ahead.
Very nice. Great catch. And we've got Steve joining us. I know he was stuck in traffic, so he has braved the world to come here. So we will make sure he gets a chance to introduce himself when he shows up here. I know he's almost in the door. There he is.
There he is.
Oh.
What an entrance, Stephen.
Geez. Well, hi, everybody.
Hey.
Sorry. All right. Hey.
And
oh, look at all the pretty faces.
So tell us who you are and your connection to Korean horror.
Let's see. Well, I'll start with my connection. It's really just that I'm a fan, as made so by some very recent things that I've watched. I'm Stephen Van Patten, writer, tequila enthusiast, and generally, just a skinny guy from Brooklyn with overactive imagination. Hey, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. When did you discover Korean horror and what was your gateway drug? Nicole?
Um, my gateway drug was Train to Busan, but actually I saw, God, and it just went straight out of my head. No, The Ring was the first thing I saw. And I was like, that's really freaky. And then I kind of put it away. And then I saw Train to Busan. I was like, what is this? What is this? And I had seen the one where the kids are on the island. They all have the battle, but I can't think of the name of it. The Hunger Games kept getting referred to it. It'll come to me. Anyway, Train to Busan was the one that really made me go back and actually start looking at Korean horror more closely. It was just so, so good.
Okay, Derek.
It's a little bit complicated. I remember in 2006, I was just starting to get my feet wet in the horror genre again, and had heard a writer I admired talk about the movie A Tale of Two Sisters, which sounded incredibly unique, utterly fascinating, and managed to find a DVD copy of it near where I lived, and watched it almost with an adrenaline rush. It's funny because the only thing, I wasn't really knowledgeable about Asian horror, with the exception of maybe the J-horror classic Audition, which you watch that and that's like having your hands stuck in the generator. But in many ways, I actually found, so I had a little knowledge of J-horror, but then I come to K-horror, which was a lot more jarring and a lot more disturbing. And then subsequently, we have a family friend who holds what are called movie calls. So we get together, we watch and often roast movies. And he invited us to watch The Host, which he described as his Harry Potter. So, and that's become a lot of my knowledge and a lot of my diet since then.
Okay, Tigris.
So same, my introduction was actually earlier than 2006, but it was also A Tale of Two Sisters with Old Boy attached on right after. So I literally had two of them to watch in the same go. And I just remember sitting there, and just FYI, a little bit of history about me. I had a Korean babysitter, so I've always been immersed in this type of environment, but I never really on the horror spectrum. So when I watched A Tale of Two Sisters, I just remember sitting there at the very end and I was like, what did I just watch? And how creepy was that? And then immediately I went straight to Good Old Boy, it's Old Boy, I think is what it's called. But when I went into that and then I saw that right after, that was it for me. I was like, okay, I'm sold. Let's find everything I can that has to do with Korean drama. And yeah, I've been hooked ever since. And yeah, it's my life.
Nice. Rachel?
I'm going to go along with Nicole. Also, I am taking notes and jotting down titles. So thank you all for the recommendations. Train to Busan is what got me into Korean horror specifically. Like I said, I have been a horror fan pretty much all my life. But I had heard a lot of really good things in the horror community about Train to Busan, and I decided, okay, I'll give it a try. Loved it. It was so good. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's just find everything else we can in that genre. And I've just been, kind of plowing through things ever since.
Okay, RJ.
Well, one night it was my husband's turn to pick the movie, right? And I never know what he's gonna pick. And he says, "Mommy, you gotta see this movie." And he puts on I Saw the Devil. And the whole time I'm sitting there going, where has this movie been my whole life? And I mean, I've been hooked ever since, because when I tell you, it was serious. Like we watch it over and over again just for fun, because we're like that. But that was definitely my gateway, and I mean I've been hooked ever since.
Nice. Stephen.
Well, it was kind of by accident. I want to say because I mean, I guess everybody knows I also stage manage a few TV shows, but I actually ended up in a conversation with, of all people, Harry Connick Jr. and he recommended Audition. So let that marinate. And so I watched it. I was freaked out. I was like, wow, okay, they're really doing stuff. Because it's very well made. And then after that, like everybody else, Train to Busan, that's what shoved me off the cliff. So now when I see stuff on Netflix, I'm like, oh, I guess I know what I'm doing today. And and then I just absorb everything else.
Nice. Elle?
So my gateway wasn't actually Korean, it was Japanese, and it was Ju-on, the Ju-on series, Ju-on 2 specifically, that just it tore me up. But that was my gateway into, other folks are doing some scary things, so I need to pay a little bit more attention. And like everyone else, I saw Audition, but that wasn't my first, it was my second, that was my third Asian horror movie, that was done outside of the US. And it was it leaves a mark on you. But if I'm talking about a Korean movie that I saw, The Tale of Two Sisters, just like Derek, we have very similar tastes here. That movie is, I saw it again recently, about a year ago, and I'm still same reaction. It's just visceral, and you just can't, you almost can't breathe halfway through. And I think that for me, I've watched some Malaysian horror, I've watched Japanese horror, which might be my favorite, Korean horror, and for different reasons. I like ghosts, and Korean horror does some good psychological, and as well as zombie movies. But Japanese horror does really well with the ghosts, and I really kind of, dig that. But the texture of these movies that we're going to be talking about tonight is so different from what we get to see with American fare. So, I mean, my gateway was not Korean, but I have easily moved into Korean movies, and it has been, what's new for me are K-dramas. That was a new thing I didn't think I'd get into, because let's get but with the whole idea of all the different episodes, and then you have these, you're hooked. As long as I can be hooked into something, it's good. But normally I want the movie to be over with. With some of these K-dramas I've been watching, I've been wishing that it could go on for 5-6 seasons. So yeah, lots of really wonderful work to talk about.
Well, I don't know where you guys found all these things so early, because I'm a Netflix person, and now after we ran through a lot of stuff on Netflix, my wish for my birthday was I want a subscription to Rakuten Viki, but I just didn't see these things to watch beforehand, so I'm kind of jealous. So I'm the newbie here. My gateway to this was Sweet Home, which is on Netflix. And it was like, oh yeah, okay, this is a zombie movie. Let's see how they do it in Korea. And then it was like, oh, that's how they do it in Korea. Well, holy cow, that's kind of a different take on things.
Right.
And that was one of the things that really sucked me in, because I do so much research about legends and lore and myths and spooky stuff for my writing. I'm very steeped in Western ghost stories and monsters and things like that. And I'm looking at this going, okay, said it was zombies, but that's not our kind of zombies. Whoa, everything's off the table here. And I love that it had the ability to completely surprise me, and I couldn't predict, well, is it a fast zombie or a slow zombie? Oh, holy heck, they're not any kind of zombie like we've had. And I love that about it. And I've also loved some of the K-dramas that you think it's going to start out and just be a little paranormal. It's going to be kind of nice and fluffy. And then you get something like He is Psychometric, which takes this dark turn about 2/3 of the way through, and you're going, well, I didn't see that one coming, and now all of a sudden we've got serial killers and guys with knives, and I won't spoil it for you, but man, don't go into the basement. And it's really creepy. And so yeah, I'm in love, but I'm the new one to the table. So and by the way, through this, I've discovered a whole bunch of wonderful food as well. So thank you, K-dramas.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because I've packed on some pounds finding all that food. So, I just want to say that.
Well, the place that's really good isn't close to us, so it does cut down on frequency, but man, it's good. Anyhow, what appealed to you about the Korean dramas to set them apart from everything else that you've watched in horror, or what do you think they do better or differently that's really worth giving a shout out to? Derek?
For me, a lot of it is just the odd juxtaposition of all of the elements, and I think of something like, first of all, one of my favorite writers is Joe Lansdale, who does very different things every time he sets pen to paper. He's not just doing a horror story, he's doing a horror story with crime elements. He's using elements of a science fiction story or an element of fantasy. He will use humor throughout. And when I look at things like some of my favorites, there's a movie called Save the Green Planet, which is it's part psychological drama, it's part horror story, it is part science fiction. It is one of the most insane things you're ever going to watch. And it's that, for me, that's a lot of its appeal. Just how are we going to do different things with this material? The other thing I would say is it really can catch you off guard. Specifically, something like either The Host or The Wailing uses elements of comedy at the beginning, so that when you try to go into a horror movie expecting scares, suddenly your guard is let down, and it catches you completely off guard, in some cases out of the blue, so that you're not prepared for the things that come later, especially as they reach their often devastating conclusions.
Okay, Tigris.
So for me, I don't know if I feel like I'm more on the Asian spectrum than I am on the Western spectrum, just because it's been with me for so long. But what I've noticed, especially recently with some of the new movies, that the new shows that have come out, like Happiness, was really, really good. Train to Busan was good. The Peninsula was good. They just do things in a different way. But for me, I do a lot of research with mythology as well. But I don't focus on the Western aspect. I'm in Egypt, I'm in Japan, I'm in Chinese, I'm in Korea. Those were my focuses on. And so when I watch these movies, it's true that some of them will start off with like a comedic aspect, right? And it'll kind of just like, you're kind of like, oh, this is going to be one of those sappy, funny ones, but kind of sort of scary. And then boom, all of a sudden the cinematography changes and it darkens and you're like, wait a minute, did that just happen? Let me go back and let me just chew on that just for a little bit longer. And they're emotional, like you get emotionally invested. Whereas Nightmare on Elm Street, any of the Stephen King movies, it's a one and done. You might think about it a couple of days later, but it doesn't resonate with you, right? Like at the end of those dramas, you're thinking about it days later. And for me, I'm going back. I've probably watched Tale of Two Sisters probably 20 times. I've watched Happiness 6 times now. Train to Busan and The Peninsula, those are like my staple movies that I just go to, like when I just want to have something in the background going. And I've gotten to a point now to where the subtitles, yeah, they're there, but I already know what they're saying. So I'm just like typing away. I'm like, oh, there's my part. Sweet Home. I bought the entire set to Sweet Home. I have all 12 books. And they're all in Korean, and it's just as good to gnaw on when you're reading it from their perspective than watching it. There's another one, and it's not so dark. It's called Doom at Your Service, and it's literally about a guy that he's like death. But it's a love story too, but then there's also some dark elements to it. Tale of the Nine-Tailed Fox was another really good one. And every single episode was different. There was a new like mythological piece to it, and it was mind-boggling. I can't even, I can go on for days. You guys probably want to save me for last when I answer this question.
Rachel, how about you?
One of the things that really stood out to me the first time I watched K-horror, because I came in through the zombie road, zombie street, and the creepy movement, it it's practical effects, it's not CGI, but you see these actors transforming, and it's deeply unsettling. And one of the things I noticed, and this is not across the board, there are some exceptions, but there is not the same emphasis on getting the camera in your face with blood and guts and people being ripped apart. Like, there is blood, certainly, but there's not these horror thing, torture porn type moments where they linger on somebody getting torn apart and eaten. It's there and it's horrifying, but it's there's a step back from it. Whereas I think a lot of Western horror tends to go all in on the gore, like the shock factor. And the other thing that I really appreciate about it is the social commentary. And it's surprising, or maybe not so surprising, how much of it can be applied to the US as well. So it's very insightful. It's dramatic, it's horrifying, but it's also smart. And I too walk away and I think about it. I can, like Tigris said, you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, okay, popcorn, boom, done. Train to Busan, Alive, All of Us Are Dead. You're gonna watch that and it's gonna stick with you.
Okay. RJ.
I think Lisa actually touched on it earlier, but I really appreciate the psychological aspects and the characterization. Like I look at these characters and I'm fully invested in them. There doesn't seem to be this overt necessity, I guess, to kind of make them apologetic. Right? Like, these characters are who they are. And sometimes I get frustrated with, Western-based storytelling, because I'm thinking some people just like to do bad stuff. Some people just like to do crazy stuff. Don't be giving them a cat to save. They wouldn't save the cat. They would kill the cat too. Like, this is what human nature is. It's messy. It's not always predictable. It's not always pretty. And so I can appreciate that, a lot of this K horror just kind of gives it to you straight with no chaser. Like, hey, look, I just want to torture this dude because, yeah, he did something bad, but I want to torture him because there's something broken in me too. And so I love that. I love being able to get to know those people. And Train to Busan really reminded me a lot of, okay, I'm an old, and so I did read Brian Keene's, first works when they were first run. And so I loved being introduced to the zombie genre in the way that he kind of laid tracks for it in the literary field, right? But I was always so upset about how everybody died at the end. Like, I came from a different background and I'm like, there should be some hope. I have no hope. And this is terrible. But I'm really glad that I had Keene as my introduction to zombie. So by the time I got to Train to Busan, I was like, oh, well, okay, everybody dies, even the loving dad. Sure, right? That's what happens in zombie stuff, So I think that I can really appreciate that honesty. Because we don't always get honest human feelings in horror stories. A lot of times it's like kind of sugar coated. It's kind of let's give them some redeeming qualities. And I'm like, man, no, I'm old enough to know everybody don't need to be redeemed. Nope, let them go, let them all die. That's it.
Stephen.
Well, getting back to the thing about unpredictability. The thing that I actually love the most is that because there's this complete disconnect from Hollywood, so there's no like Dwayne Johnson, for me to be like, well, he's not gonna die, and all of that. It's like I because you don't know as an American, you don't really know who's who, or who's like big Hollywood connected person as far as Korea is concerned or anything. Everybody, it's like a clean slate. So you're watching it and you have no idea who's about to get 86. You have no idea whatsoever. And I'm really enjoying that. And it actually helps, getting back to, I forget who said it, but being able to emotionally invest in different characters, you know, you actually get there faster because there's this like level playing field, you know, because Ludacris isn't there. You know what I'm saying? So it's you know, so for me, that's kind of what I'm enjoying.
Okay. Elle.
You know, I think that there are two things for me. Like there is a freedom in the storytelling that comes from, it's not only in Korean movies, but there's a freedom to not stick with the norm. There doesn't have to be a happily ever after. If everyone's going to die here, then everyone's going to die here. And that's what it is. And you are fine with it as the viewer because you're like, everybody should die here. Like you shouldn't be able to get out. Much like, you know, what RJ was saying, not everybody needs to be redeemed. But there's the freedom to do that where I don't see that same freedom here in, you know, American fare. I'm not seeing that. You kind of can tell what's going to happen within 10 minutes into the movie sometimes. And, you know, it's just a trying to see if you're right, you know, by the end. But with Korean movies, I've never watched, I mean, just to touch on what a lot of people have said about the emotional connection to some of the characters, I've literally never cried watching a zombie movie. I was fine with everyone getting chewed or whatever, but Train to Busan, I bawl. I see it so many times. I've enough already. I keep thinking I'll get used to it. No. There's some points that just, I can't take it. And this is a horror movie with zombies that are superb, by the way. You know, and so the other piece that I think that's important is the acting. The same freedom that we talk about with the storytelling, these actors and actresses are giving their all in these roles. We're not just loving the characters because of the writing. We are looking at the projection and the interpretation that these people are coming up with, these actors and actresses in these movies, and they are putting it on the table differently than you're seeing in American fare. I just have to be honest with that. I mean, there's a show called The Voice, or Voice, it's just Voice. And one of my favorite actors now I've picked out of that show. And it's a K-drama, it's a thriller. It's not necessarily a horror movie, but from that thriller, I followed this one actor, Kim Jae-wook. I followed him from there to The Guest, which is a horror TV show. There is a character within The Guest that it's with the father, and I don't want to give it away, but he's in the hospital, and when he gets possessed, it is one of the most amazing expressions of, you know, possession and someone taking over that I've ever seen. This character I followed to watch, what's the name of that one that was just mentioned a moment ago? All of Us Are Dead Here. He's in that, and he's the father in that. And even then, there were some things that he did in that you know, series that are just amazing. And it's not just that actor. You could pick anyone from any one of these shows and pick an actor and follow them into their next piece, and it's amazing. I did the same thing with Along with the Gods, which is a sci-fi sort of, you know, show. Fantastic, gosh, right? Followed one of those actors into The Kingdom, and I'm just like, you know, you just can't get out because you find, you know, maybe it's because I don't know their names. Maybe it could be, I don't know. I don't think that's it. Because if I like an actor who's, you know, an American actor, I'll follow them as well. But that doesn't happen as much as when I'm watching a K-drama, because I'm seeing craft. I'm seeing true understanding of what the role is, what the motivations are of that role. And then I'm seeing them take their spin and throw it on there better than I'm seeing it done here, to be honest. You know, I've made the mistake sometimes of putting on, because I don't understand Korean as well as I think I do, right? So I'll walk out the room thinking I know what's going on, and all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, go back. You have to read it, fool. You don't actually know what's happening. And you know, you hear the music, but you don't know what they said. Come back. And I have to watch, but it's that, I don't care that I'm now pinned to the television, can't move around because I have to read the you know, the dialogue. There have been some words I can now pick out because a certain actor says certain things all the time in every movie. I'm like, he's ad-libbing. I know this now, right? And it's good because I'm interested in the roles this person's playing. you know? So I think that those are the things that keep me watching. Those are the things that separate, you know, K-dramas and Korean movies from what we're seeing here in the US, that's created here in the US, at least for it's the passion. I guess it's summed up in a word for both the screenwriters and, you know, the folks putting the film together and the actors and actresses. In a word, it's passion. So,
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to piggyback off that point. It's like, you know, well, of course, you're talking when you're leaving the Western world, you're talking about better acting to begin with, because they're being cast because they can act, not because they've got a hot mixtape, not because they were like successful in bum fights or some other nonsense like that. These people are actually actors and just actors. So there you go.
yeah.
I mean, some of them are K-pop idols. So you get, but mind you, part of that K-pop training is acting lessons. So
Right.
still,
Right.
you're
There's an actor who's in The Silent Sea. His name is Lee Jun. He was in, and Nicole knows, I just found out that he was in a Korean, a K-pop band that I actually didn't even know about. And now I'm kind of like a fan of that band now, because I'm like, ooh, because I like the role he played in this show. Because it's not just, and again, it happened with Squid Game. I mean, there was something I remember a while back that there was one of the guy who's running around in Squid Game trying to win the game is actually a big actor. You know, and we don't know that here in the United States. And then there was an interviewing snafu where someone's asking a question like, what does it feel like to be big? And he's like, what are you talking about? I've been doing this forever. Like, it's like, that's something. So we don't actually know, but he's been doing that, but you wouldn't have, it wasn't, the passion is what made us pay attention to that actor in that show. And aside from the screenplay and what they were doing with it, wasn't an incredible idea, but that actor put everything on the table. And I think that's what resonates with people, especially now with so much content. You know, we can go to anyone, we've got a million places to watch a movie now. But there's something to be said for the fact that we have a panel on Korean movies. So, I mean, you know.
I think too, the reason why we get to see so much of their passion is because they're stricter. It's not like the Dwayne Johnsons or the Britney Spears, or, you know, like he was saying, like, it's not a popularity contest. They're really focusing. And I follow a lot of K-drama actors, and it starts off like that. You see one, you're like, oh my God, I've seen everything that this actor is in. But then also too, I also look at the interviews. I've been to a couple of K-pop concerts. They spend hours perfecting their skill. And to them, that's their report card. They go off of more so what, and they call them nitsons, they go off more than what the people are saying online. And they're so, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, they are critics of themselves. They're very critical of how they portray themselves. And so when they get into these roles, they put their all to it. There's a female actor, and I think it's So Soon-hee, where she played in Name. It's called My Name, and basically out to get revenge for the death of her father. But then I saw her in Nevertheless, which was a romantic K-drama, two totally different aspects of her. And when I saw her, I was like, she's so versatile. Park Seo-joon is another one. That guy.
Oh yes. He's one of my favorites. I love him.
He is amazing. And I'm so happy to see that he's now crossed over into the Marvel universe. So I'm
right. Oh my gosh, he's so good.
Well, you know, and it's funny because I don't speak Korean. I picked up a couple of words, but I find myself telling my husband to turn up the sound on a movie I'm watching subtitles on. Because why? I don't know. But I think in addition to the excellent acting, I think the writing's better. Right. I'm so often angry at Western, especially American TV shows, not so much with British, but how many times there's forced drama, how many times the characters make stupid choices just to advance the plot and get it to the end, you know, so something happens. And I honestly see next to none of that in the Korean movies. So it makes my writer heart happy because the writing is good. And I also love the different twists on things, like their Grim Reapers are not our Grim Reapers. Right. And so that's a very different thing. And I love it because I'm sitting there Googling so often, not only what is he eating, but wait, where did that come from? What is that?
Mhm, mhm.
Nicole, you haven't had your shot at this yet.
No, I haven't, but thank you. I like RJ and Lisa said, I also enjoy the characterization. And like Rachel said, I also enjoy the social commentary. If you look at Sweden, and you see that in Train to Busan, right? His wealthy father is not really close. He's not close to the daughter at the beginning. He kind of has to be at the, trying to save her life. They're therefore bonded. You see that in Squid Games. I like how they take the mundane and make it terrifying.
Mhm.
And you see that again, it's just a trip to Busan. It's just a kid's game, right? We play in all these, you see it in Alice in Borderland. You
Mhm.
see it in All of Us Are Dead. We're just at school today and this is what happened. So they take very mundane things and they make it horrifying and terrifying. And it's a lot of the social commentary that drives some of these decisions. And so that's one of the reasons why I absolutely love it. It's and it sits with you, it lingers. When I was editing Slave Stories, and Lisa and Stephen both know this, the stories that I picked were the horror stories that lingered, the things that were emotionally impactful that stayed with me. Stephen's story makes me cry. Lisa's story made me want to go date someone. They were incredibly impactful and emotional. And I think that's why I really love K-horror, because it's that emotional impact that lingers. I cried like a baby, Lisa, at the end of Train to Busan, and I still do.
Mhm.
I watched, is it Haba, the Six Finger? It's the first movie I actually saw that had Lee Young-jae in it. I didn't see him in Squid Games first. I saw him here and I loved it. And I followed him. So when I saw he was in Squid Games, I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this because I know he's a brilliant actor. But that show was about two girls and one dies and a lot of other family drama. But it sat with me and it lingered. Days after I had moved on from watching it, I was still thinking about it. It's smart, like Rachel said. It's unpredictable, like Stephen said. It's great characterization. All of the things that you guys and Tigris mentioned as well. All these things you guys said are the things that we don't get in the the cheaper versions of horror that we get in America. We get here quick, fast, ramen level, basic ramen level horror instead of getting gourmet ramen. And so we're just not getting that quality that you see. And I don't know why that is. If you look at Parasite won the Oscar. Again, about social commentary, not a lot of blood and guts and gore. It's a lot of characterization and a lot of commentary on the haves and the have-nots in Korea. It's smart. And those are the things that make all of those. You think of Hellbound, unpredictable. Yeah. And anyone watched the Hellbound series, because halfway through, I was like, wait a minute, did we just pivot?
One of
unpredictable.
I bought the script and I have the graphic novel. I was not playing around with that one.
What?
You know what? Can I add something in here about that unpredictable or the mundane? Alive. Did you see Alive? It's like a 2020. It's the zombie apocalypse, but this kid didn't feel like going out with his parents, and he was just like, no, yeah, all right. And I behaved like that. I know people who behave like that, and it was a normal reaction. And all of a sudden, nobody's coming home. Everybody outside's a zombie and just stuck in that house.
And you're stuck in an apartment. This apartment, this box.
And you're
my gosh,
talking to someone across the, from buildings.
Across the building.
It's an amazing. Oh, this happened in a day. Like I woke up and this happened, and then the zombies came. It's but that's how life is. And I think that that's the beauty of the movies. They're not afraid of just not having to have an explosion, not having to have some special effects, some crazy whatever, The Rock type walking off a tight wire, with his arm cut off. What movie was that? I can't even remember it. I'm just like, what's going on here? His balance should be off. He's gonna whatever. And that doesn't happen in this. You have people going, is it just us left or what? And that's real life. And I thought that was amazing. And that's it's to punctuate what everyone said, because I agree with all of it. It's all of those things and more.
Yes.
So this is probably going to be our last in-depth question, because everybody is just so into this. It's wonderful. And we're coming up on time before we do our final roundup to tell people where to find you. But horror so often taps into the weight of history. And when we watch Western horror, when we watch American horror, we know that history. So we know what's coming if this is a antebellum house in the Deep South. We know the sins that are going to show up there. If it's a robber baron mansion in Nantucket, we know what's coming to an extent. We know who was there. If it's a small town in Maine, Stephen King has taught us a lot about those people in small towns you got to watch out for. But what I found in the Korean horror is you have a whole different horrific history to deal with. You have the Japanese invasion. You have the Korean War, which most people in America have pretty much forgotten about. You have, there's a whole concept for it, Han, which is the idea of grudges. And in so many of these stories, either somebody has to let go of their grudge to level up in the afterlife or move on to the afterlife, or the grudge is what drives them. It's a whole different depth of grudge. That's why it has its own word and concept in Korean. And this is something new when we watch it. We can't just dig into our mental filing cabinet and say, oh yeah, I get that reference. And it doesn't mean necessarily the same thing to us as outsiders to the culture as it does to somebody steeped in that culture that it may have a visceral awareness. The other thing you see in a lot of these is large building collapses. Well, there was a very famous department store, collapsed, killed everybody, shoddy workmanship. So how do you approach that? How do you internalize that? How do you connect with that history to understand horror on a different level than just, oh, this is scary? Tigris?
Well, first and foremost, I'm very superstitious. There are a lot of horror movies that I don't consider horror movies. I actually consider them gateway movies that I'll just stay away from. I'll just leave it at that. I don't like to invite the uninvited into my home. But with that being said, with the Korean drama, you kind of run through that anyway. So for me, being as superstitious as I was for as long as I have been and I still am, I literally have to mentally prepare myself. And because I've been around it for so long, I kind of already, not that I have an insight, but I kind of have a knowing going into, like how you talked about the building collapse. And I did some research. There was a couple of building collapses in the early 80s back then that were horrifying. I looked up why they talk about, like, you know how we have the thing where you toss the salt over your shoulder? Well, they don't toss it over their shoulder. They toss it at you to like get you away. I looked at all those different things, and for me, I was shocked. I was a little bit scared at first, but then I have my husband who's my pillow at night. So my thing is, I won't watch these dramas at night. I'll be, I know it sounds weird because I'm very superstitious. And if I undid the blur in the back, you could see like all my stuff I got going on back here. But I watch it in the daytime. And then immediately after watching the Korean drama, I'm watching a Korean romance, or I'm watching a Korean comedy. I'm watching something that's going to take my conspiracy psychotic brain down a notch and bring me back to happiness. But it still resonates with me. And I've gotten so where I've even had some nightmares where I'm like, oh, who has a grudge against me? What did I do wrong? Why is this happening? And my husband's like, calm down, Tigris, you're taking it overboard. You're like going to the next level. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's just how I am. But that's how those movies are. They resonate, but they're also very fascinating. The Joseon period, one of the things historically there with the shamans and the rituals and the bringing down of the rain and the possession, it's so visceral on a level to where how can it not be believed? Because they're 9 times out of 10, they're not using CGI. So these facial expressions, the makeup, the raw emotion that just comes through, it's believable. It's so believable to me. Like, I'm like, that really did happen. I don't care what anybody said. That's a real possession. That really happened to somebody. They're writing about it because they know firsthand. And I'm not going anywhere near that. I'll just stay away.
Well, and you learn, don't throw salt at ghosts, throw dried kidney beans.
Exactly. You gotta throw the kidney beans. Or what's the other thing? there was another thing that the little, I don't know what it's called, you know, the little shaky thing where like the bells are going and
Yeah.
they're chanting and they're like trying to get, it's like, and the trees with the ribbon, WTF on that. If I see one of those, I'm going the other direction. I'm not going nowhere near that. No.
How about you, Rachel?
So as a white Westerner, I know I'm missing a lot. I have started to kind of scratch the surface of doing research so that I can come at it from a deeper understanding than just, ooh, that's scary. But for now, until I do, broaden my cultural horizons and learn more, for me, it is about the visceral human fear, but also, and we keep coming back to that, the relatability of the characters. These people are human. We mentioned alive. Well, here's a kid, he's not special, and he's thrown into the middle of the apocalypse, and I can imagine myself acting very much like he did. So the characters are relatable on that human level, and so that's what I connect with and hold on to, because I don't have the cultural awareness yet, and it will take me a long time to get there.
Okay, RJ.
Well, a lot of the aspects, I know Tigris says super superstitious. I say spiritual. I'm a Black Southerner, and you talk about a grudge. You talk about folks taking stuff to the grave. Like, I'm like, yeah, cool. That's like another, day that ends in Y, right? That's what we do. And when we talk about, paying reverence in the afterlife, or paying homage to the ancestors, like this is something that we do in our house. Like, we have walls that we call our beloveds. I mean, they're our beloveds. There are ancestors that are deceased. So the whole idea of the spirituality, or the spirits, and the way that you pay homage, or the way even that you think about the community. I was raised to help the community, right? Like, you don't worry about just you, because just you making it, it's not that serious. It's not that important. But if you take other people with you, that's a really huge thing. And so I think that my own culture is very similar, to what I see in a lot of the, not just the K-horror movies, but in horror from other places. And so it kind of makes me really happy that, I kind of have this mixed up kind of household. I mean, my husband is Afro-Latino. And so we kind of got this whole jumbled up thing going that's very similar. And like Rachel says, though, this connects on a human level, though. I mean, like, who doesn't love their children, right? I mean, theoretically, right? Who doesn't want to rescue as many of their compadres as they can? Who doesn't want to avenge, their wife's life from a serial killer? Who doesn't want to do? I don't know, maybe not everybody. I probably would, but and so that's where the connections are. Very, very similar. To my own life. And so, I see it. It doesn't strike me as odd. And actually, there's a sort of a kinship there where I kind of go, okay, cool. We all do this. Okay, that's great.
Okay, Stephen.
Well, I'm a Capricorn, so I'm all about grudges.
Yes.
And I have a nice long list of people that are dead to me.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I can certainly relate to that aspect of it. Am I an expert on Korean culture and how they particularly handle this sort of thing? No, but when I see them act out their, grievances, I'm like, oh, yes.
Right. Yes.
I'm with you. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hell.
Y'all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the point. I think that it's the human connection, right? I think that there are some shows, and I've been struggling with the name. I cannot come up with it, but there's some TV, and it's more than one, several Korean drama shows where someone gets slapped at work, like the boss doesn't like what's going on, they slap, and I'm like, I mean, it's happening a lot. So this really goes on. Like for real, my boss could come up and slap me right in my mouth. And then I'm not gonna react the same way this person did in the show, but this is a thing. So some things surprise me like that, right? Some things surprise me, but other things are human reactions that I would have. Several things that have been said. There's an actor that I follow. He's always calling somebody an SOB. I mean, he is not, it's the same word every show. And I'm like, I know when he's about to say it, and I'm here for it because now I can say it in Korean. I will not, but I can say it, and I'm saying it in my own house because I'm like, this is what I mean. Obviously, here's the word for it. Some reactions to life there are universal reactions to life. Okay. And I've been fortunate enough to be in a situation. I didn't know if it was fortunate at the time, but a woman and I from two different worlds, she spoke German only. I don't speak German. I don't even know what, but there was something that we were engaged in. We were both looking at the same thing, and the thing in front of us was beautiful. So we looked at each other and we were like, wow. And it was fine. We agreed. We didn't need anything else because there are some things that are universal. So I think that, and from a scary aspect, in the United States, everyone's speaking English in this movie. Doesn't matter what movie it is, that I still may not understand what's happening if it's a movie that's based in the South. I'm from the North. I mean, I'm from New York originally. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what all this. Somebody's mentioned something to me that I can't name it. Gullah? Is that right? I don't know what that is, right? I mean, I've heard it, and I'm from the US. I don't know what that is. So it doesn't have to be a movie that has this in a language that I don't understand for me to be confused about what's happening here. But an emotional response, if the Gullah folks are going to have a response, like someone took my thing, I'm getting my thing back, then I can understand that and relate. So just because it's a different language or it's a different culture that I don't necessarily know all the details about, that doesn't stop me from engaging on the very human level. Because like I said, a lot of us have very similar actions. If I knew I could slap someone and not get in trouble, I mean, like all my years of working, I never knew this was a thing. It's a thing in some places. So no, but I enjoy watching it happen. Not that I want to see people get hurt, but I'm like, man, I mean, like, do it again, because you can do that. I feel it, but I don't do it. So it's interesting to me to see something different and relate to it in a way that I'm going to relate. Now, I could see myself having a conversation with the writer going, I mean, that was kind of exciting that we had somebody, didn't do their job right, and they had to stay till 10 p.m. alone in the building. Sure. So yeah, it's human. It's just a human connection for me. So that's how it works.
I'm enough of a research nerd that when I see that there's something that obviously means more than the superficial meaning, I'm like, oh, I got to Google that. I got to drill that down, because this is something cultural that means more than it appears to mean. And I want to know why it's visceral. So that's my research nerd coming out. Nicole?
Yeah, so I like the human part of it too. I think a lot of people have already said that. So a lot of things I'm sure I'm missing. But for me, it's the emotional impact, it's the character development for me. So those are the things that but if it's something big, Gail, like you said, I'm like, oh wait, that's important. I might write it down to go check on it later, but it's not my front and center reaction. I'm going to finish this movie. I'm going to finish this series out. But those are the things that, when I'm listening to K-pop, it's the same thing. I'm like, oh, that's something important. What does that mean? And I'll go try to figure that out. But I am nowhere near, like Rachel was saying, I'm nowhere near a level where I can know, like Lisa does, who's been in the trenches a little bit longer than I have with Korean dramas and K-pop and K-horror. But I love the fact that, culturally speaking, there's overlap, right? That even though it's in Korea, this very human response is the same thing that I would do. That my mother is apostolic and she speaks in tongues. Okay, so there's a lot of, my mom thinks people do things to her because they're possessed by demons, and so that's my everyday life. So when I'm watching horror, K-horror, and I'm like, and there's a mother who's very either spiritual or very superstitious, Tigris. I'm like, oh yeah, I can identify. Very much so. So I love seeing that overlap though, and it just reminds me and roots us all in our common humanity. And that's one of the things I think horror does well, but in Korean horror does specifically well.
Okay, Derek.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to sound like an echo for the most part of everybody else here. I mean, like Rachel, my knowledge, unfortunately, of Korean history, it's somewhat broad, but I don't know a lot of the details. Like RJ, I am, even though I was born in the North, my roots are in the South. And so in a lot of ways, I tend to look at Korean horror specifically almost as a Southern Gothic. It is very much a case of the, of Faulkner's dictum of, and I'm going to put on my English major hat. Sorry, everybody. But, the past isn't dead. It's not even past, which is why, you see things like, again, I'll bring up The Wailing, where and yes, spoiler everybody, sorry, but a lot of the goings on are coincide with a Japanese man visiting this village, which has deep roots in the in the Japanese and Korean relations during the Second World War. You look at things like A Tale of Two Sisters, that has a good deal to, that harkens back, or at least history is very important in there as well. Even something like The Host, which, has a lot of its roots in just trying to, in the modernization of Korea, has a good deal of meat on those pieces. Sometimes I'm just, I don't want to say I'm ever a passive consumer of this material, because I'm always engaged. Even when I don't understand what's happening, I have that visceral, almost gut reaction to what I'm seeing on screen. So from that standpoint, I'm repeating everybody here. It's just these human things that you're able to latch onto, and even if you miss 95 to 97% of the context.
Well, folks, I think we could talk all night, and this has been fantastic. And so we'll have to come back and do more of it again. But for now, we've blown through our time. So I'd like to go around kind of a lightning round here. Everybody say real quick where people can find you online. And if you happen to have a new recent or upcoming book, tell us that. And let's start with Elle.
Oh, you can find me at elmariewood.com or on Twitter at elmariewood1 and Facebook at facebook.com elmariewood. I have my first mystery coming out soon. It's coming out in August, mid-August. Yeah, I'm excited because it's like, wow, I didn't know I could write that, but that's pretty cool. It's called Mars, the Bandman, and Sarah Sue. And this is like the year of firsts for me because my first dark romance novel just came out. So I'm like, come on, because that's another thing. I write psychological horror, folks. So these are two new places for me. But yeah, if you're interested in finding out more, just go to elmariewood.com and there's a page for each of those books. You can check it out. Nice. Stephen.
Let's see. On Facebook, you'll get the government name. That's Stephen Van Patten. Instagram, Twitter, it's at SVP Thinks. I thought it was clever at the time. And my website is www.laughingblackvampire.com. One of my short stories is in the very recent release of Even in the Grave. And as everybody else knows, I've got all other kinds of stuff floating around: vampire novels, serial killer novels, anthologies with Mark Abbott and Kirk Johnson, and the Beef, Wine, and Shenanigans podcast. And yeah, that's pretty much sums it up.
Okay, Tigris.
Tigris Eden. You can find me at tigriseden.com, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I even have a Discord community that does cater to K-drama, K-pop, and all things Korean. So you can find me there as well, chatting it up with my members. I do have a book that just actually came out in February called New Beginnings. It's a contemporary, and what do you know? It's based in South Korea and Louisiana. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, Rachel.
Okay, so you can find me at www.remckay.com. The Rachel Langella books are found there, as well as the R.E. McKay books. We had a new book come out under the R.E. McKay brand last month. It's called Fortress, A Prince Among Men, and it's an adventure thriller. And we're currently working on the next installment of the Asheville Arcana universe.
Very nice. RJ.
Well, I like to tell people that I haunt Twitter from behind at @RJacksonJoseph. But I do have a website that's really being built, like for real, y'all. And it is at www. Yeah, see, y'all laughing because y'all like, man, she's been building this thing for like years. Okay, anyway, it's really happening now. www.RhondaJacksonJoseph.com. And my collection is up for pre-orders now on Amazon. The title is Hell Hath No Sorrow, Like a Woman Haunted. And so I'm really excited about it. The publisher did a really good job on the illustrations, cover, and so I'm just massively excited about this whole thing.
Awesome. Derek.
Right. You can find me on my website. It's DerekAustinJohnson.com. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I believe, is DAJ42. And let's see, I'm in several, the books out right now, books and magazines out right now, like I said, Generation X, edited by Rebecca Rowland, the Horror Zines Book of Werewolf Stories, edited by Jeannie Rector, Midnight Tales #5, which I'll have to double check the publisher on that, but you can find all of that information on my website as well.
Okay. And Nicole.
Okay, you can find me at NicoleGivensKurtz.net, or you can also find me at MochaMemoirsPress.com.
All right.
And
And I'm pretty
show us up and go really short. What was that, Nicole?
We're, I mean, they can find like all my Instagram, Twitter, and all that stuff from those websites, so I don't need to go through that.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com and morganbryce.com. If you spell them right, you can find all of my social media, some variation of those names. The most recent books are Three Time Travelers Walk Into a ? And it's an anthology of exactly what it sounds like. That just came out from Fantastic Books. The new novel, again, Fox Hollow Zodiac Book 2 came out yesterday from, and that is the second in my Shifter series in Fox Hollow under my Morgan Bryce name. And then we've got the House of Cards, which is the 8th Spell, Salt, and Steel book coming out from Falstaff Press. So lots going on. Well, thank you all for such a wonderful panel. We are definitely there's more to discuss. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more horror here on ConTinual, so we'll see you online.